The recorded history of typhoons dates back centuries. While we don't know a lot about the first typhoons, we know plenty now. We can now track where these typhoons go. We can gain insights on how fast they travel. We know the wind speeds they produce and how much damage they can cause. And with other weather systems like typhoons and hurricanes getting worse and worse, it's important to remind ourselves just how destructive these events can be. Today, we look at some of the worst and scariest typhoons in history. I'm Mike with List 25, and here are the 25 scariest typhoons to ever make landfall.
25.
Typhoon Bess struck Japan in August 1982 and cut across the most populated areas of Japan. By Mount Hitagadake in Nara, a peak rainfall total of 42.4 inches, including 36.3 inches 24 hours. Super Typhoon Bess was responsible for $2.38 billion in damages and 95 fatalities.
24.
Typhoon Gebbie was the most intense tropical cyclone to make landfall in Japan since Typhoon Nancy in 1993, causing significant damage to the Kansai region. While the casualties were kept low, Gebbie still managed to do $12.8 billion in damage, making it the third most costliest typhoon in history, behind only Muriel and Hagibis. I'll get to those later.
23.
When Typhoon Takagi hit in 2004, it was the most fatal typhoon to strike Japan since Bess. Takagi was the last of 3 typhoons to impact Japan from September to October in 2004. A total of 18,000 people were forced to evacuate their homes. Damages from the storm amounted to $2.3 billion.
22.
Typhoon Karen was the most powerful typhoon that hit the island of Guam and is considered one of the island's most destructive events. It destroyed 95% of all housing in Guam, leaving over 40,000 people without homes. In the aftermath, people had to be evacuated to Hawaii, California, and Wake Island because they had nowhere else to go.
21.
Typhoon Forest makes its mark in the history of typhoons by being the fastest growing typhoon ever recorded. It went from tropical storm status to fully fledged super typhoon in just under a day. It brought 11 inches of rainfall with it as it damaged over 40,000 homes.
20.
One of the more recent typhoons on this list, Typhoon Meggie, made landfall in 2010, and it was classified as a Category 5 super typhoon. It's known as one of the costliest typhoons to ever hit the Philippines, as it did $255 million in damages.
19.
Although Typhoon Wando was only categorized as a Category 2 typhoon, it caused significant damage in Hong Kong. It damaged a great number of fishing ships and left over 70,000 people homeless.
18.
Vongfong was classified as the 6th super typhoon of 2014, shortly before it reached its peak intensity. It was indicated that Vongfong had become equivalent to a Category 5 hurricane on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale with 180 mile an hour winds. It maintained this intensity for a total of 30 hours.
17.
Typhoon Nancy didn't do nearly as much damage as some of the others on this list, but I'll get to those later. No, Nancy earns its spot on this list due to its incredible speed. At 215 miles an hour, Typhoon Nancy holds the record of the typhoon with the highest winds. It also held its Category 5 classification for a grand total of 132 hours.
16.
Typhoon Ida was a Category 5 that hit Japan on September 20th, 1958. The landslides that it caused destroyed over 2,000 buildings and swept away hundreds of bridges. 2-foot-tall tides destroyed over 120,000 acres of rice fields. It claimed the lives of over 1,000 people and left 12,000 homeless.
15.
The 1991 Typhoon Meenae has become known as the costliest typhoon ever on record. Ahead of the storm, 99 typhoon bulletins were issued, warning residents about Meenae. There were 236 warnings related to storm surge, high winds, waves, and flooding. In total, Meenae did $18.8 billion in damages across several countries.
14.
The 2019 Typhoon Lamia was the second costliest typhoon in Chinese history. It did $9.26 billion in damages in China alone. It also indirectly affected the Philippines by enhancing a monsoon, which caused massive flooding.
13.
Typhoon Neguri hit multiple nations during the 2014 typhoon season, but it did most of its damage when it made landfall in Japan. It was reported that in just 3 cities alone, there were over 10,000 power outages. In Japan alone, Neguri did an estimated $632 million in damages. Not only that, but the passage that Neguri took to make landfall brought with it a massive heat wave that saw temperatures of over 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
12.
Typhoon Haiyan is one of the most powerful tropical cyclones ever recorded. When it made its first landfall on November 7, 2013, its winds reached up to 145 miles per hour, and it sustained this speed for 10 minutes. Haiyan devastated 5 different countries in Asia and left 11 million people homeless. Not only that, but it also did $2.98 billion of damage.
11.
Just 1 year after Ida caused massive damage, Japan experienced its strongest typhoon yet, Typhoon Vera. Vera was classified as a Category 5 super typhoon when it hit on September 20th, 1959. It destroyed thousands of homes, ruined countless crops, flooded rivers, and it left over 1 million people homeless.
10.
Typhoon Nina was a Category 4 typhoon that hit China in 1975. Whereas most typhoons do the most damage from winds, Nina caused its damage with the mass amounts of flooding. The flooding was triggered by the collapse of the Banqiao Dam in Jimedian City. Not only that, but the flooding caused other smaller dams to collapse as well, causing even more flooding.
9.
The 2018 Typhoon Monkhood caused extensive damage in Guam, the Philippines, and South China. It was also the strongest typhoon to make landfall anywhere in the Philippines since Haiyan in 2013. Monkhood left behind a trail of severe destruction in its wake. It caused a total of almost $4 billion in damages across the multiple nations it hit.
8.
In 2018, the Northern Mariana Islands were hit by Super Typhoon U. It struck just a few months after the islands were ravaged by Typhoon Monkhood. It caused massive damages to the remote U.S. territories, and due to a slow response time, the Mariana Islands are still feeling the effects of the typhoon.
7.
Typhoon Sodalor was the 3rd most intense typhoon in 2015, and it was the worst typhoon the Northern Mariana Islands had experienced since U. At peak intensity, it had a 10-minute maximum sustained winds of 215 kilometers per hour, 130 miles an hour. It also broke a record, leaving almost 5 million households on the island without power.
6.
Just 2 months removed from a devastating typhoon in 2001, Taiwan suffered from Typhoon Nari. Landslides caused by the typhoon's massive rainfall buried people and entire buildings. At the height of the storm, nearly 650,000 were left without power, and 350,000 lost water and telephone services. Even the metro system took over 6 months to fix due to the massive flooding.
5.
As a weakened typhoon, Mellow made landfall in Japan on October 7, 2009, with wind gusts over 100 miles an hour, causing massive power outages. At the height of the storm, an estimated 500,000 residences were without power. The effects of Mellow were also felt in California, breaking several rainfall records. The remnants of Mellow were able to produce up to 70-mile-an-hour winds and 10 inches of rains in the Santa Cruz Mountains.
4.
The Haiphong typhoon originally made landfall in Haiphong, Vietnam in 1881, and is, to this day, the 3rd most lethal typhoon ever recorded. Its category is unknown, but what is known from that historical records is that it was massive.
3.
Typhoon Hagibis hit Japan in late 2019 and was the strongest to hit in decades. There were more than 850 confirmed incidents of landslides and mudflows, the highest number recorded since 1882. In fact, Hagibis did so much damage that at the time of making this list, cleanup is still being done and will likely continue for years to come.
2.
The Category 5 super typhoon Cera hit Japan and South Korea in 1959, but it caused most of its damage along the coast of Korea. Cera was the worst typhoon that South Korea had seen in 50 years. Its wind speeds topped out at 105 miles an hour, which at the time was the highest ever recorded. It left over 750,000 people homeless in South Korea alone and caused over $100 million of property damage.
1.
To this day, Typhoon Tip is the largest and most intense Category 5 super typhoon ever recorded. At its peak strength, it had a diameter of 2,220 kilometers or 1,380 miles. It was so large that its effects were felt in Korea, the Philippines, China, Japan, parts of Russia, and even Alaska. So, have you ever experienced a typhoon? Let us know in the comments below, or tweet your answer to us at List25 or to me personally at Michael B. Estrin. And if you liked this video, check out the ones in this playlist here. Though I'm not sure the word like really fits for this, but
I wouldn't say we like this video.
you know what I mean.